Versailles War off, sing it loud. Into the Romeo Foxtrot, shall we dance?
I'd like to see it as a on its own, to be self-sufficient and to kind of, be a real piece of history, and a real part of the war that no one really knew about or heard about. And I want it to be part of a series that really kind of points the finger at not just the State Department, but the administrations that allowed this to happen. War is the last resort. War is the last thing you trigger, because once you start it and once you occupy a country, it ain't easy. And it's not just a tragedy in the terms of lives. It's a tragedy in terms of the adverse effect on your country.
Good morning, Vietnam!
Wipeout!
Surfing was our quiet time. It's how we escaped from the war. It's how we escaped in the middle of the war to our own space, our own time, our own friends, and it's how we survived the war. We would have never survived the war had we not had that opportunity.
I think this is a terrific idea for either a documentary or a feature film. I mean, these Air Force guys, these pilots, did the most incongruous, crazy things, brave things of anybody in a war. 1 minute they're on a surfboard, and an hour later they're sitting in a cockpit of a jet plane going Mach 3 or something with big SAM missiles being shot up at them, and they come back, and what do? They go to the office club and drink martinis and play liar's dice. We're talking about some pilots who are completely irreverent. Yeah, they take orders, sort of. But once they get into the air, if you ever see them there, you know they're the masters of the sky.
Okay, Detroit, let's get out of here to the southwest. Give me your direction and altitude. Roger, I'm going 240, right on the deck.
Oh, tonight at the bar they'll be singing. In the States it had always been fun. And we'll tell tall tales of the mission. And we'll bring to Old Peak #1.
I had run into some, well, actually, we swiped a Jeep one. We needed a Jeep, and we sneaked up there and cut the chain. I hate to say this. I mean, it's thievery, I guess, but kind of neat. We took a Jeep only for about 30 minutes. And one of those lieutenants, I wish I could remember his name, is a great guy. He said, come on up to the officers club with us. And there they had these two blondes, and I conned them into going down. I said, I got a better place. You'll have a better time, and we can do a little skiing. I got a friend down there that's dynamite. Might do a little surfing.
Okay, this is Banjo. I've got a contact down in the target area. Pull up about 10 degrees and try to point. Well, let me see. Get me lined up. Okay, keep turning left. Okay. I'm level out now. He's strong. 5 points. He's going to get strong here in a minute. Okay, I got him here. You got about 11, at 12 o'clock and 1 o'clock. Have a look down in there, Banjo. Take it down. Take it down. All right, this is Banjo. We just got a line. Take it down, Chris. Which way now? I'm in a cloud, yeah. So get the line, 11 o'clock. We can take it down. Roger, Banjo, take it down. We got a launch. I see them coming off the pad at 12 o'clock. I think we're all right for the time being. Everything else looks good. Okay, Detroit, let's get out of here to the southwest.
Someday you wish upon a star, wake up where the clouds are far behind me.
I think it was serendipity that kind of got me there, because one of the guys in my squadron had been shot down and was MIA, and his job was special services officer for the group, and I volunteered for it. I said,
So
look,
what does special services mean?
all of the above. We book entertainment. We provide recreation for the troops. We keep them occupied during downtimes when they might not want to go back to their bunks and just take a nap. We provided recreation. We built basketball courts, tennis courts, squash courts. We built I call it a multiplex cinema, but it was a pre-multiplex cinema. It was basically 3 screening rooms where we basically could show movies 24 hours a day. So anybody coming off the flight line at midnight and didn't want to go back and go to sleep or do whatever, wanted to go hang out with their friends, have a beer, played nighttime basketball. We had some lights on the basketball court so guys could go out and get some exercise at night. It just kept everybody moving and occupied, not sitting around bitching.
Stuff landing all over, bouncing off you, and you get just as scared every time. And it gets worse. The closer they get, the more they throw. The more you get scared. When you get up, it's a wonderful feeling just to be alive, to be able to walk around after one of those.
The rifles have been jamming, the mud's been, has slowed everything down, and the artillery comes in everywhere, and it just gets pretty futile and frustrating sometimes.
The really depressing part about it is, like, there isn't really much you can do, you know what I mean? You see the rounds come in, you see your buddies get blown away and wounded and stuff like that.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of mistakes, but, you know, the grunts don't always do what the captain says, you know. We got, see, the captain will stay back, he'll tell a platoon or something to go out so many 100 meters, you know. We don't do it. We only go as far as we get out of sight, sit down, and come back in. We don't want to hit contact. That's one thing we don't want to hit.
surf this place? I'll say surf this fucking place!
At the end, my great friend Larry Jackson, who was flying A6s at that time, and one of my great buddies that I met in Chulai, toward the end of my tour there, got me an opportunity to be a special services officer. Oh, that was a tough job. I was on the beach, South China Sea. And I'd never forget it when saw Jackson come through one time with a surfboard coming through Da Nang. That was it. I felt like, here we go. Now, the apocalypse now, of course, didn't come for years, but there we were. There we are out there with skis and surfboards. And I'll never forget it. One time they had a rocket attack in the background of us, and it was a pretty good ways away, I guess. Out there skiing, and Jackson coming in on his surfboard. Pretty funny. I know Jackson and I used to run in the 110-degree heat up there where your shoes just literally melt off just to show off. He was a lacrosse player at Virginia, so we were kind of competing.
Well, we had all kinds of names for it. I mean, we called it, we just called it Chulai, and we called it the beach. Some people nicknamed it Jackson Hole because I was the head lifeguard. And, so it kind of got, it kind of got a reputation, but it was, it was called lots of different things. And I think one of the things that really made it interesting is that my executive officer, Ray Fraley, who was a communications officer, really helped set the beach up so that we provided recreation for Americal, for the Seabees. Anybody wanted to go fishing would just make a phone call. We had operators, like MPT operators on call, taking your order. Hey, I need a sailboat this afternoon at 4 o'clock. I'd really love to go water skiing. I've got a party at 4. Some colonel would call from Americal. And we provided support for everybody, not just the Marine Corps. So we had lots of other people take care of us. And this was a closed community up there. The Marine Corps didn't interface with the Army, and the only place we ever interfaced was to go to the PX. So we were invited to go to that club on the bluff, so to speak, and we learned some very interesting things. I think from that exercise. It was when we came back home and did some other stuff.
I guess playing hard goes like this. I was in Da Nang. I had been flown down to Da Nang to take some papers, and going back, I was sitting in air freight waiting to be picked up, and there was a rocket attack, and I dove into a hole, and right in beside me dove a fine-looking woman from Australia. Her name was Marlene Hoare. Well, I quickly changed that to Molly Bruce. She was on her way to Chulai with her band. She was a singer, and she had a co-singer, Vicki Weaver. And so we flew back to Chulai, and I got him a 6-by, and she entertained Roger Staubach that night. And that gal could find me anywhere, I don't care where she was, and I'd get these patched in Lieutenant Raymond. Well, Bob Hope came to Chulai in '68 with Ann Margaret. So Larry Jackson called me, and he said, you think you could get those 2 gals up? And I said, well, I don't know where they are. Well, can you try? Well, lo and behold, Marley patched through and got me. And I said, you girls, can you be in whatever date it was with us? So Larry got me a Panama suit, and he was in a white dinner jacket. Molly looks superb, and so did Vicki. So here they come, and Jackson had this truck. We drove to where the show was, and we had to walk down to the stage, and the wounded were down below. And we're walking down, and I suppose all the folks sitting around there thought we were part of the show. Anyway, we got to see Bob Hope and Ann Margaret sit right in the first row with these 2 good-looking women.
Everybody really wanted to see, great troop shows. So we had built these little bungalows, and we could host these shows, and they could stay at the beach. They didn't have to stay in the middle of the base or kind of downtown or whatever. We put them up on the beach, and so we had that. And every 2 weeks, my partner, XO Ray Fraley, went to Saigon, and he booked entertainment and brought them up to July. And every second, the second and fourth Thursday, or the first and third Thursday of every month, he would land on the helicopter pad, and I would see him walking up the beach with 3 or 4 women. And they would be the go-go dancers, the singers, or whatever, and the guys would come and and stay there, but we protected the women, and they were a great asset to have kind of in the neighborhood, so to speak. So we had shows at the clubs, at the enlisted clubs and the officers' clubs, and we had the Bob Hope show came at Christmas time, and that was
that big USO show showed up at Chulai.
Yeah. And I had a really good friend, Mike Phillips, and he gave me a heads up on the Bob Hope show, and he said, he had been invited to kind of help greet and so forth the show, and would we be interested in kind of supporting him? So Fraley and I hopped on a plane to Hong Kong. We got some civilian clothes, and came back 24 hours later with a white jacket and a coat and tie and whatever. And we escorted all these gals that were basically entertainers, and including the Bob Hope show for the show. So we brought them into the Americal arena, so to speak. Probably 30,000 people there. And we sat these girls down with the guys that had been shot or wounded or were in the hospitals, and it was the most fun day of my whole career. My father said he was never going to write me again after he saw me on TV with the Bob Hope show. He said, you're not fighting a war over there. You're goofing off. But I think everybody had a great time, and it was a great success. And the mobilization to get a Bob Hope show, around that quick was enormous, unbelievable. The orders and how many choppers it takes to move them off the carrier and into the situation, and the advance team, and to get ready for the next team, because they were doing a show a day, for 2 weeks leading up to Christmas.
Here we are at Chulai, the Malibu beach for losers. Anyway, this space is occupied by our side, isn't it? Huh? That is, today. They trade real estate around here like it was the San Fernando Valley. We didn't play this space last year. It was the Kong's turn. And fair is fair. We didn't want to step on their toes or anything. We're entitled to rotation, too. Chulai has Navy, Army, Air Force, Coast Guard, Seabees, and Marines. Here you have a choice of 5 wars. Now, and a lot of promotions are given in the field here. I saw a water buffalo with sergeant stripes. Holidays are so emotional here. I saw one big tough Marine kiss another Marine. Now he said, I can't help it. He's my replacement.
In 1948, I guess, maybe it was 54, I saw a movie called The Sands of Iwo Jima with John Wayne. The Duke played Sergeant Stryker. And from that day on, I wanted to be a Sergeant Stryker Marine. One spring afternoon, I left Chapel Hill, North Carolina, drove to Raleigh, North Carolina, and joined the United States Marine Corps. I must admit I had second thoughts immediately, but I thought it was at least honorable and was going to buy me some time in life I needed. So the Marines were the answer. So I went to OCS, and from that point on, it was sort of a fugue for me. I don't remember a whole lot about it except getting through it. The first thing I remember was that first morning at 5 a.m., reveille, some Marine sergeant knocking us out of the rack. I looked to my left, and there was this little pudgy fellow. His name was Candidate Alan Herman from Chicago, Illinois. We all were chased out into the parade deck, and there he was again, little Herman. He helped me many, many times, like assembling a rifle and helping that rack pass inspection. And so the OCS was finished finally after 10 weeks, and I'll never forget standing out in the night guard duty one night about 3 o'clock in the morning. You're shivering and you're cold, and about that time Sergeant Riker hit me upside the head with his hand, scared me, sneaked up behind me and said something to the effect, bad night for patrol, Candidate Fraley. And then he said, how's it gonna feel coming back from Vietnam weighing 130 pounds? I weigh 190 pounds now, platoon sergeant, minus that leg, you asshole. I thought, whoa, maybe I'm not cut out to be a jarhead. Jesus, one thing to be slapped upside the head, but losing a leg was another. But I remembered what my grandfather told me years ago, you haven't give out, you give up. And I thought, okay. You have to remember, a lot of these fellows that signed up for the OCS didn't make it through. So I made it through, and then went to the basic school, they called it, the 67. I was sent to Camp Lejeune. There was a delay, and I got a weapons platoon down there in Camp Geiger. That was a great experience for me there because one of my young troopers' brother, who had gone through OCS with me, was already killed in Vietnam. So that was kind of an eye-opener for me to already there's somebody I knew that got killed that I'd gone through with.
In a movement such as this, United States Marines head for security duty in South Vietnam. Their landing is at a beach north of Da Nang, where they will guard the American jet airfield against attack by Viet Cong guerrillas and infiltrators from North Vietnam, only 80 miles away. They land in full battle gear, but meet no opposition from the guerrillas known to be in the area. Others of the 3,500 Marines are to come by air transport. Their duty will be strictly defensive, but they will shoot back if attacked. Marines usually do.
We arrived in Da Nang late afternoon, dusk. We were at the tarmac. There were 25 caskets being loaded onto a C-130 to be delivered back to the States. That was my first impression of arriving in country. I was told I could be on a chopper in about 2 hours and sent down to Chulai. Arrived at Chulai, it was dark, and I was assigned to a temporary barracks, and we had incoming rocket attack at 2 a.m. that morning. I had no idea where I was. I had no reference points at all. I just knew that I was in a barracks with about 12 other people, and that we hit the bunkers, and that was it. And that was my first night in Vietnam. It was kind of uncomfortable.
And you were all of 21?
No, I was older than that. I was an old guy. I was 26, I think.
So even with those...
It was uncertain. I mean, I didn't know if the sun was going to come up or not, but that was probably the scariest, 12 hours of my whole tour.
Hey, I hope they're just fucking with us. I ain't ready for this shit. Amen.
So for the viewer who doesn't really know Vietnam, where's Chu Lai? What's the environment around that location?
Chu Lai is 49 miles almost due south of Da Nang. It's on the beach. It's right at Tam Key. There's a river just north of it where the Navy was stationed with their CBs. Americal was wrapped around us on the north, and then the Marines had about 4 squadrons on the base. So it was a 2-mile long runway, and it had an old runway, Marston Matting runway, that had been decommissioned in '65. But it was basically an old French Indo-Chinese resort at one time, so it had a beautiful beach, a big crescent-shaped beach. Batanga Peninsula anchored the south end of it, and that was notorious for being a NVA kind of safe haven for in-country R&R. So it was, being so close to an active base, we were kind of amused that anybody would even think about, having the enemy so close.
So you began to fly?
We flew the first day. I mean, we flew some FAM flights. The first day they were just close air support and some TPQs, which were basically, ground-controlled drops, not necessarily close to friendlies. But they didn't give us much time to tune in.
Above field and jungle, close air support. Help clear the way for the man on the ground. Reinforcing. Support those men during the long hours of daylight and the longer hours of darkness. Support them with B-52s against concentrations of troops and supplies. Give the enemy no chance to rest. Support them with tactical fighter bombers to keep up the pressure and help destroy our enemy's ability and desire to attack. With hundreds of thousands of tons by airlift, the supplies come through. But there are other lines of supplies that flow the other way along the Ho Chi Minh Trail. It winds down from the north through mountain passes and under the cover of green-top jungles. Along the flank of southern Asia, the coastline of North and South Vietnam takes the form of an elongated S. A demilitarized zone between the two countries along the 17th parallel at the sea was established by solemn treaty. To the north is China. To the west are Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, Burma, India, and Pakistan. Moving down from the north, men, oil, machines, the tools of war are fed along the Ho Chi Minh Trail to bolster the aggression in the south. They move by night over the narrow roads, through mountain passes, and along trails hidden by the jungle foliage. Trucks and pack-laden coolies by the tens of thousands. Usually, by day, they remain hidden in the jungle to venture out again at nightfall. That lifeline must be severed. When it is repaired, as it always is, it must be severed again. Gallon of fuel, every gun, bullet, even every ration of rice destroyed north of the 17th parallel may mean the life of a man on the ground south of the 17th. The military call it interdiction. That is the mission of those who fly to the north. Support the men on the ground by strangling the supply routes.
The flights sometimes were choreographed, group missions with the Navy. Rolling Thunders were done in unison and choreographed with the Air Force and the Navy and the Marine Corps, and each would participate, a number of planes and come in, every 40 seconds or every 2 minutes or whatever to kind of hit them from all angles. They were pretty hairy.
So you were going after the Ho Chi Minh Trail a lot.
Well, we were, but we didn't know it as well as we should have known it, because the Ho Chi Minh Trail was the major supply line, and it was outside the boundaries of the war, or outside the boundaries of Vietnam, in many cases. So we hit lots of these river crossings, lots of these bicycle assembly points. And even though we had these great briefings, it was a little nebulous as to, we didn't know the big picture. We just knew our piece of the puzzle, and that was it. And I don't think that's necessarily the right way to train and to get the best reconnaissance out of a mission.
I couldn't see any purpose in the war back home. It never explained to me why we're actually here. And I really had nothing against these people. I want to kill them. And you go out in the woods and they'll shoot at you first. You'll see them, they'll shoot you if they get the chance. You have to shoot at them first. It's really bad. I still don't know why I'm here. That's God's truth. 3 months and I don't know why I'm shooting these people.
Awful sick of it. I'll be so glad to go home. I don't know. It's the worst area we've been in since I've been in Vietnam.
You think it's worth it?
Yeah, I don't know. They say we're fighting for something. I don't know.
The difference between a lifer and a grunt is the lifer is supposed to know the why of it, and the grunt thinks there is no why of it. He's just over here, and it's we all count it in days. We can almost every one of us tell how many days we have left to do in Vietnam.
When you're out on long-range patrol, this new kind of grunt, do you give orders or do you sort of enter into discussions?
It's a combination of both. It's not near as many orders as I thought it would be. There's an old saying in the United States Army that you don't tell an American soldier, you tell him why. And I didn't believe it as much until I came to Vietnam, and I've had several times when I thought my people were being insubordinate because they wanted to know why, or my NCOs thought they were being insubordinate because they wanted to know why. And maybe because of the emotions of the time, I had to say, you'll do it, damn it, because I say you'll do it.
What did you mean you're going after a bicycle assembly point?
Well, this was quite by accident, and this is right at the Ashall Valley and a little west. We were out one night and we couldn't find any targets. We were told to go to this district and this coordinate and bomb it, and there was nothing there. And so we kind of looked around and we used our AMTI, Airborne Moving Target Indicators, and we kind of strayed a little out of the Ashall Valley and a little west, and all hell broke loose. We saw all these trucks moving south, 5-6 miles an hour. They were just kind of creeping along, but we saw tons of them. And we had CBUs, bomblets. Excuse me?
What's a CBU?
CBU is a 500-pound bomb, and it's got little grenades in it. And it splits open and covers a pretty wide territory. So we dropped these, and all hell broke loose. We saw incendiary fires light up, all kinds of stuff light up. And we were told that there was a river crossing at that point where bicycles would bring down gas cans, and that was a primary means of transportation in a lot of instances because they were undetectable. Whereas a big 6x or truck was very easily detectable. So they were using bicycles and moving gasoline, with bicycles, 20 gallons of gasoline on a bicycle.
How many bikes would you see in a column?
Well, it wouldn't be the bikes in a column. It would be the bikes would come down to a river crossing and drop off the gas cans. They'd cross the river in a boat, and then the bikes would pick it up again and keep moving, rather than so the bikes were kind of making a section delivery, dropping it off at a river crossing or ferry crossing, and then picking it up on the south side or the east side and moving it further in. So we found some of this in photo reconnaissance when we went over to Ubon and Udorn, and we saw these bikes kind of just all sitting in these massive bike racks. There were bikes strewn all over the place. So we were fighting bikes. I'd rather be fighting trucks and power plants, but it got down to bikes.
So this was a major hit then when you found this huge column of
Yeah,
trucks and everything.
and we went back and we reported it. It was west of the Ashall Valley, and it hadn't been kind of on our designated hit list, and we were probably out of bounds by straying over the border. So, but that's where the activity was. And I compared it to playing football on a football field, and we're out there, lining up, and there's no enemy in front of us. They're up in the stands. They're over west of the Ashall Valley and in the Ashall Valley, so let's go in the stands and play football. So that's what happened. We strayed over in the Ho Chi Minh Trail and played some football.
And so I was assigned a young platoon they gave me. And all these fellows had all these young Marines had been brought in from I Corps. It's almost like an R&R for them. And that became a civil action group. And I had a Vietnamese staff sergeant who wore the Marine uniform, and he was my interpreter. And we got to go out into the hinterlands, taking medicines and so forth, and build a school, refurbished a pagoda, and little Girl Scout troop, called them Little Brownies, got a great picture of them. And one of the great rewards I got in Vietnam was I got the government over there gave me a what they call the honor medal, Vietnamese honor medal, for doing something that was constructive as opposed to destructive. We went to Quang Ngai and My Lai. You might remember, of course, what happened there with Calley, Lieutenant Calley, and that horrible massacre. And what struck me was this. One, I knew nothing about it. None of my troops knew anything about what had happened at this point. But when I learned a year or so later about what had happened and remembered going through that province, nobody had a clue. They were friendly to us. There wasn't anything that gave me any inkling that had been this horrible tragedy that occurred, which is one of the great tragedies of that war, because it's something that everybody remembers of how bullying we were. The gall to think we could just go in and just kill men, women, children. It made no difference. I don't know how you live with something like that. Really don't.
March 16, 1968. U.S. Army soldiers from Charlie Company, armed physically and mentally for aggressive combat against the Viet Cong, were led by Captain Ernest Medina and Lieutenant William Calley to enter the village of My Lai. They were informed that the My Lai village had been cleared of all civilians and that the Vietnamese they would encounter in the village would be hostile. Without hesitation, the soldiers came into the village, and although the people they saw included the elderly, women, and children, they fired and killed indiscriminately. Gathering the people, they bayoneted old men, shot the back of the heads of praying women and children, and raped and killed innocent girls. In the midst of this chaos and turmoil, a group of soldiers, realizing their comrades' mistake, stood up for the villagers. Hugh Thompson, Glenn Andreotta, and Lawrence Colburn took action to save rather than slaughter the innocent civilians of My Lai. Altogether, on that fateful day, 504 innocent Vietnamese were killed as enemies.
I could go back and remember all the sleepless nights that we had, everything that went on, My Lai, all the people that were killed there. Every day I try to make it easy. I thought that by drinking that I could make it easy and make it go away. I'd lay down at night, it's still the same thing, whether I drank or whether I didn't drink, it's still the same thing. Just the memories kept coming back.
I will never forget. When I am reminded, I suddenly remember the pain. A chapter in the book opens. There is no way I will ever forget. I will never forget.
As far as living with the shame of My Lai, I have no shame. I did what I was supposed to be doing. The shame rests with the politicians and the military, not with me, the other members of Charlie Company, Lieutenant Calley, or Captain Medina. The shame lays with them. It's a national shame.
I think we didn't talk about, the politics of war back then. We were really not ignorant of it, but we really didn't get into it. I mean, we had a mission, we had focus, and I think we were all good soldiers and we all did what we were supposed to do. And I think the correspondence coming back from the U.S. was starting to I think, be troubling, as to what was going on and how things were really going over there. And it was, you can't measure war success by body count. Well, we killed 10 times as many of those guys as we lost. Well, that's not a good measure of it's like an NFL game. They lost 6 guys, we only lost 1. 7 guys were lost, and that doesn't make it a win. To see where McNamara had sent Johnson a memo, I think in late '67, saying we can't win this war.
Towards the end, when McNamara wrote, the president said, whatever it takes, let's get out. McNamara finally came to either his senses or began to see the losses mounting up with it was sort of like in a tunnel, and you can see some light at the end of the tunnel, and you're rushing towards it, and when you get there, all you have is Joan of Arc with her hair burning. There was no end, there was no way. So he finally just said, hey, whatever it takes, get our young people out of there. There's nothing to accomplish. He said, let's get out, and he was right. I just couldn't do it at that time. Heck, as I recall it, the war escalated. I mean, when we talk about escalation, we're not talking about anything but more troops on the field, more boots on the ground. We're not really talking about any winning. We're just talking about it being a buffer at the DMZ, basically. But heck, the Viet Cong, as we know, and the NVA, they came south too. They were across the borders and coming across from Laos and Cambodia. And we couldn't go over there. We all know we had troops going over there and sneaking over there occasionally, and once in a while maybe a stray bomber would somehow drop one over there, but just lost more lives. That's what it caused, more lives. We were looking back from Vietnam and seeing what was going on in America. The young people were just up in arms. 50,000, I've forgotten what year it was, just basically stormed the White House. And then Agnew, I never forget that comments he was making, blaming the young generation that they're all at fault. They're just a bunch of kids thinking they're entitled to they were right. They were right.
The student now goes to college to proclaim rather than to learn. The lessons of the past are ignored and obliterated in a contemporary antagonism known as the generation gap. A spirit of national masochism prevails, encouraged by an effete core of impudent snobs who characterize themselves as intellectuals.
Well, come on, all of you big, strong men. Uncle Sam needs your help again. Got himself in a terrible jam way down yonder in Vietnam. Put down your books and pick up a gun. We're gonna have a whole lot of fun. And it's 1, 2, 3. What are we fighting for? Don't ask me, I don't give a damn. The next stop is Vietnam. And it's 5, 6, 7. Open up the pearly gates. Well, there ain't no time to wonder why. We're all gonna die.
But despite these difficulties, we can be proud tonight of the fact that we have achieved our goal of obtaining an agreement which provides peace with honor in Vietnam. And on this day, let us honor those who made this achievement possible, those who sacrificed their lives, those who were disabled, those who made every one of us proud to be an American. They returned from years of communist imprisonment. And every one of the 2.5 million Americans who served honorably in our nation's longest war. Never have men served with greater devotion abroad, with less apparent support at home.
We are asking here in Washington for some action. Action from the Congress of the United States of America, which has the power to to raise and maintain armies, and which by the Constitution also has the power to declare war. We've come here not to the President, because we believe that this body can be responsive to the will of the people, and we believe that the will of the people says that we should be out of Vietnam now.
Purple Heart, Army Commendation Medal, 8 Air Medals, National Defense, and the rest of this garbage. It doesn't mean a thing.
Because about this time, I had figured it out that we were never, ever going to win this war. We weren't quite as bad off as they were in Korea, where they were just fighting for one little piece of, holding one little piece of earth. Jackson and his crowd, with the A-6s and the Phantoms, they couldn't go into Laos and do any bombing, and then they stopped bombing Hanoi. It was just kind of frustrating to know that, I know we had a briefing once during Tet, when it didn't make any sense. And I remember the A Shau Valley when it lit up like the 4th of July for I don't know how long. But they just kept, the deaths just kept mounting and mounting and mounting. And no, we were winning the body count. Wow, does that win a war? What war? What are we even doing there? What politicians are thinking? When you think about what happened in the aftermath, that is to say, after we finally left. Joe Giannini, he reminded me a lot of what we saw in Apocalypse Now. He came home later, I remember he had a radio show. He was a lawyer, later became a lawyer, and had a radio show, Marines Against War. And he sent me some of his stuff to read, and it was pretty dark. And I know he had some tragic circumstances and situations that have haunted him ever since, and I think mainly about losing young men.
I never spoke out about the war in Vietnam, ever, because I left too many friends behind that were alive, and too many of them were killed. I couldn't do that. I've had nightmares as soon as I came home, recurring nightmares, basically the same thing, incoming that you can't do anything about, rockets, artillery, getting overrun because we almost were overrun one night. And then the other nightmare is being sent back for a second tour. Can you imagine that? That's a nightmare that I've got orders to go back, and I'm saying to myself, but I've been there already, and there's nothing you could do. You got to go back. When we came home, we were the losers that lost the war. That's how they treated us. And I think that's one of the reasons, or the main reason, we didn't speak about it for so many years. What they learned is they separate the warrior from the war. We were never called warriors. We were never called heroes. In fact, one of the best books that ever was written about my battalion, actually, was called The War Without Heroes. This famous photographer was with our battalion. But that's the one thing they learned. But calling everyone that served a hero it doesn't make sense to me. And when people walk up to me now, 40-something years later, and they say, thank you for your service, they haven't got a clue of what our service was about. I have post-traumatic stress disorder. I have severe hearing loss from my time in combat. I'm deaf. And also, I have chronic ischemic coronary heart disease caused by Agent Orange, which I just found out about in 2013. It's completely, all of these things have really diminished me. I'm at the point where I can't practice law anymore the way I used to. Now I'm mad because, especially because of the Agent Orange. We drank it, we ate it, we bathed in it, and it made us really sick, and the government denied it, and for a long, long time, and only admitted in 2010 that if you have heart disease like me and John McInerney has, it was caused by Agent Orange. They don't even fight you on it anymore, but they don't treat us right.
During the Vietnam War, the U.S. military fought an invisible enemy. Viet Cong fighters who quickly attacked, then slipped back into the dense jungle. In 1962, American forces responded with Operation Ranch Hand. Over the next 9 years, spraying an area about the size of Massachusetts with defoliants, the most notorious being Agent Orange.
It was one way we were going to win the Vietnam War, dump herbicides all over the jungle so the Viet Cong would come out and fight.
To both expose Viet Cong hiding places and deprive them of life-sustaining crops, large swaths of Vietnam were left barren.
Enough food to feed 600,000 people for a year has been destroyed.
Despite this sudden devastation, U.S. officials said the spraying created no lasting harm, and many agreed it was helping turn the tide on the Viet Cong.
What they're doing amounts to a pretty important form of conservation in itself, the saving of American lives.
But the communist North Vietnamese presented a different picture of Agent Orange, one that became increasingly horrific as time wore on.
North Vietnam charged today that defoliants have produced many instances of miscarriages, congenital defects, and monstrosities among children.
The U.S. government initially dismissed these charges as communist propaganda, but following a study that linked dioxin, a contaminant in Agent Orange, to birth defects in laboratory animals, the spraying of this herbicide was discontinued in 1970. The herbicide was also eventually banned in the U.S. That did not stop the growing concern about Agent Orange, which took a new turn a few years after the last American soldier had left Vietnam in 1975.
Milton Ross, a Special Forces advisor near Pleiku, has a son born without the tips of his fingers.
Frank Moore is nearly dead from cancer. He thinks the cancer was caused by chemical defoliants he was exposed to as a soldier in Vietnam.
Thousands of Vietnam veterans think Agent Orange is now killing them.
You know something? Most people don't care about what we went through. I have not given up speaking out on occasion and on my show, and this is like, speaking here is very important. But most people do not listen, do not care, they do not understand. And if someone says to me that has never served and been in combat, they know war, that's an insult to me. They do not know war. They might know something about it because they saw a movie or movies or they read something. They don't know what we know. And most of them, 99.99%, don't care about knowing what we know. So, but I'm not giving up. I mean, this is how you get the word out.
Time passes quickly when it's in short supply, and he's running on empty on a road with no sky. A tank full of memories from a song or a place, but never so long without seeing her face. Moonlight or sunlight is all just a blur. On the highway of life, he's a miserable cur. Jamming and damning, bearing his soul, running to lonely, years taking their toll. Flitting and fleeing, time is a race, pausing only to envision her face. Then revving his engine with a tune or a pill, but never enough to give him his fill. Yeah, time passes quickly when it's in short supply. The rest stops and safeguards. They've all passed him by. And then that last day, I remember looking up and seeing those Freedom Birds, those Continental Airline jets leaving, and you're thinking, do I need to go home? What am I going home to? Because at that time, the students were up in rage. Men in uniform weren't getting a lot of attention. You think about, do I really want to go home or just extend here until the end? Stay with some of these young Marines that I'd been assigned with and really, really enjoyed. So Ed Smith I'd always call him on St. Patty's Day in New York. And he's the one that talked me into coming back to the 40th reunion. And a few years ago. And that's the first time I saw the wall. And that's when I touched that wall and found Alan Herman's name. And that's when I learned that 2 of my classmates from TBS had lost sons in Iraq, Marines. My grandfather had been in the Navy in World War I, and my dad was a combat engineer with Patton's Army in World War II, and then I was a Marine. I've got 2 boys, and I didn't encourage them to go in the military necessarily. I wouldn't have discouraged it, but I wouldn't have encouraged it at all. Even though I taught the Marine bravado, I didn't make them feel uncomfortable about it. I couldn't imagine being home and there being somewhere else in a zone like Iraq now or Afghanistan. Oh yeah, as much as I'd think, oh, I want my boys to be a hero. No, I'd rather be a hero at home. The real heroes are those who make choices. Choices that politicians should have made. So sometimes I never forget when I was sitting at the National Airport at 5:30 a.m. after my 40th reunion, and I'm sitting there looking out over the tarmac, and I kept thinking, will I ever do anything as important again? And at this time, I'd been practicing law for almost 40 years. Will I ever do anything as important as leading young Marines?
Guys that I met in the service in the Marine Corps, my best friends, unbelievable, camaraderie, and I'm proud of that. And I'm proud to have served and did a pretty damn good job. Other than that, the fact that we got a little surfing in, got a little water skiing in, raised a little hell, that's just getting through life. I mean, we do that every day. Where we come from.
What was your job over there?
I was bombardier navigator in the A6, flew 230 missions, went over North Vietnam, did close air support in South Vietnam. The other thing that really bothers me about the missions that we were given is that we weren't over there, in my belief, to win a war. We were over there to fight a war and to do what was passed down from higher up. We left so many opportunities we could have ended that war in 2 years.
Talking to myself again, wondering if this traveling is good. Is there something else doing we'd be doing if we could? But all the stories we could tell, and if it all blows up and goes to hell, I wish that we could sit upon a bed in some motel, listen to the stories we could tell. I stared at that guitar in that museum in Tennessee. The nameplate on the glass brought back 20 melodies. The scars upon its face told of all the times that he fell, singing all the stories he could tell. All the stories he could tell. I bet you they still ring just like a bell. Yeah, I wish that we could sit upon a bed in some motel and listen to the stories we could tell. So if you're on the road tracking down your every night, playing for a living beneath the brightly colored lights, and if you ever wonder why ride the carousel. You do it for the stories you can tell. All the stories you can tell. If it all blows up and goes to hell, wish that we could sit upon a bed in some motel and listen to the stories we could tell. Yeah, I wish that we could sit upon a bed in some motel and listen to the stories we could tell.
I think it was a war that wasn't well constructed, it wasn't well thought out. How do you get in, how do you get through it, how do you get out, how do you end it? And then after you end it, how do you basically take care of all the problems that you've created with all the vets and the disabilities and everything? And I think each year that goes by, we're deeper and deeper in the hole. I mean, the way they're taking care of the Vietnam vets, the Iraqi vets, the Afghan vets, it's horrible. And it's tragic. And I really don't want to go there. American people know all that, but I just wanted to have a focal point to launch this message. That's all.